Thank you all for choosing my talk. This is a surprise to me as well. So this is going to be super fun. I realized when I was like, yep, I'm going to do this talk. I made this a very long time ago and it was made for a remote world as well. And I also like really hacked up the Miro so it's doesn't like flow nicely, but we're going to deal with that and it's going to be super fun. And it's not really the virtual bingo that we can do anymore. But there's still some of the bingo things that you can do on there if you really wanted to. They're not my graphics. They're from Liz Follen, and I love her stuff so much. But really excited to talk about social contracts. I'm Ailie. Jump in if you have questions anywhere along the way. We have an entire hour, so that's actually heaps of time to go through. A little bit to kind of start off, and I am actually going to make this as interactive as possible because I personally hate people just talking at me. But does anyone have some ideas other than like what's on the board about what a social contract is? Has anyone heard of social contracts before, actually?
Yes.
Have people done them? Do you do them in your workplaces? Is it
yes.
Okay, so some people do, some people don't. Great, awesome. Hopefully everyone's going to get a little bit more of a perspective about what they can be and how you might be able to use them. But a couple things that I feel like social contracts are, they're really just a tool to build alignment in your team, to get everyone to have a little bit more empathy for each other. Biggest thing is really about psychological safety. Teams that don't have psychological safety are a bit shit to work on. So we all want that. We want some structure and we want to empower each other to do great work. Just kind of building on that. So one of those things, it's a tool to build alignment. It's something where we can talk about our ways of working, can figure out our communication, project goals, and way more. I'm going to have little things from Adam Grant scattered across this. I love Adam Grant. Really sorry if you don't. There's a lot of him in this, so feel free to walk out if you're not a fan, but I really like him. So in terms of a tool to build empathy, like I think a lot of the teams that, all of us have worked in, our colleagues are really just other workers until we get to know them. And we all have so much more about us than just the person that's at that desk. So it's a tool to kind of get to know each other, build that empathy, and learn about who people actually are. It's also a really useful feedback tool and to figure out how people want to receive feedback. Lots of people receive feedback in really different ways, and we might be really offending people if we're doing it the wrong way. So it's a great tool to actually understand how people want feedback and how to give it to each other appropriately. It's also, with all those kind of things combined, it's a tool to build high-performing teams because it's when we understand each other properly that we can actually do our best work. Also a bit of a tool to build structure and empowerment into our teams as well. So, it's a good way of empowering people to not go to meetings that they don't need to and to figure out which ones are important, which ones aren't, and have that correct structure within our teams. I'm so sorry about how badly this is designed. I realized after I'd set the Miro up that you had to put them all in a big row and then you could click next and it flowed really nicely. And then I forgot about this presentation for 2 years and I didn't set it up again. So it still doesn't work properly, but here we are. In terms of why you should run a social contract, the real outcome, as I've kind of talked about, is to understand your team better and to build that psychological safety. So if you don't have those things in your team, start thinking about, cool, let's do a social contract. If you do have those things, but there might be other things a social contract could fill a gap for. Another key part of it, just to understand how everyone actually works best together. What does productivity look like for different people on your team? How does working best for different people look like on your team? Some people might work really, really well at really weird times in the day. Some people might want to take a really big lunch break, and if they don't get that, their work sucks for the afternoon. We all have really different ways of working well and just can't expect everyone's 8 hours to be the same as each other, so it's good to learn those things. Another big part of it that I really love is actually understand your own and each other's boundaries. I think particularly for designers and creative people, we often have shit boundaries and are just like, yeah, I'll do that extra bit of work, I'll do this thing. And it's really good to kind of know what people can actually say no to and empower each other to say no to some things as well, or say no for each other too, where people need help with that. Also a good tool to understand our own needs better, understand like what we need for ourselves to do good work. Do we need natural light? Do we need a walk in the middle of the day? Do we need certain encouragement or validation from our colleagues? What are those things that we have, and then what are the needs of other people on our teams? And it's also a great tool to create a bit of a sense of belonging. When people don't have that sense of belonging on a team, again, they really struggle to do good work within that. You actually want to have a team that wants to work together, and you have that through a sense of belonging. Also a good tool to create a really safe space, one that's free of anxiety. When we actually feel safe, again, we do better work. In terms of when you should run a social contract, it's really as soon as possible. If you haven't done one lately on a team, maybe it's been a few months, like do another one. Or if you've never done one, kind of jump at the opportunity and try and do one. I'm only like 9 minutes in, and I'm just figuring how am I going to stretch this for an entire hour. So spontaneous. Has anyone, like, when was the last person that didn't make any sense. Who's recently ran a social contract or done one with their team? Cool. How long ago was it?
Sort of not quite a social contract that kind of feeds into it every time we work on a project. I work as a consultant, so it might be the director for that project might do hey, let's kind of get to know each other a little bit, like how do I work, what works best. So I would say it would fit into a social contract, even though it wasn't labelled as such. So yeah, some directors do that. I'm on a project right now that I realised we didn't do that, and there was like things I had to pick up about how the person I'm working with wants to work or likes to work or likes to be communicated. So I realised that would have been a good thing to do prior to this project.
Yeah, definitely. And like, what kind of people did you have in the room when you did, like, so of the social contract or whatever it was? What people did you actually from the team have?
This one was just like our internal project team. There'll be people I wouldn't have worked with in other states remotely. So
good idea.
Sorry, more internal with my project team.
Yeah.
Haven't done it as much with clients that we work with, but yeah.
Okay, awesome. And was it Ayana?
Ayana, yeah.
Yeah, and you were saying as well that you also had recently done one?
Yeah, so, well, too close. We did it as a squad. Yeah, so with dev, designer, peer, IM, and we've had, I guess, a bunch of new people join the team. It's all different setup and stuff like that. So yeah, it's to, I guess, understand like what's important to someone, how they work, what their motivations are our goals align, how they like to communicate, things like that. So yeah, it was really good. I think it was one of those things that takes time because you got to put it in the calendar and make sure everyone's there. But yeah, the outcome is really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's actually a really key thing that you just said there around it is something that takes time and you have to put it in the calendar. And often it can be quite hard to get people to see the value in it as well. If you're chucking, you might need at least an hour to run a good social contract. And it's often kind of in the same bucket as retros. Retros and social contracts are such valuable rituals for teams. And so often everyone's like, no, we don't need to do those things, not important. But the amount that they improve the way that everyone works together when you actually do run those rituals is huge. So in the calendar, force people to do it, get some like leadership buy-in, get it prioritized. So important.
That's actually, we didn't necessarily do a social contract, but we did parts of this, figuring out how one of our delivery teams works together, what works well when they feel like they're doing good work, the kind of environment they need to be doing good work with each other. And I think it was off the back of a retro. So we had a retro on how things were going in the team, and we identified there was some friction, there were some things that weren't working so well, and it was the perfect opportunity for us to carve out that space to sort of figure out, well, how do we want to sort of work together, and what does everyone sort of need when they come together in a team? So
Yeah, 100%.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Go for it.
Sorry. I'm trying to stretch out to an hour as well. I'm trying to help you out here.
I do have
Taking one for the team,
I'm
people.
loving this, so.
I just wanted, look, I'm feeling a bit exposed by maybe my lack of knowledge of ways of working for everyone in the room. And I felt like maybe I should ask, who else here has never done a social contract before?
Cool, heaps of
Thank you.
You're in the right room. You're going to love this talk.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Yeah. And I guess I'm really interested in understanding like what the risks are. And I think you've already sort of started to cover that. What are the risks when we don't do social contracts?
Yeah. Also,
Thanks.
if I don't cover anything in this, I'm going to make sure there's like 10, 15 at the end, and let's ask questions and hear what, I'm sure there's going to be heaps of people in this room that have so much experience as well. And yeah, I think there's going to be lots of things to hear from everyone. So if I don't answer that, come back to it. And if I can't answer it, someone else is going to be able to. All right, so the next thing that I had along here was just around who I should actually run it with. And I do feel like if you've got a core team, even if that is just you and your product owner, if you're really small, or you product owner, a developer, even just those three together to do a social contract, so important. If you've done that and there's buy-in from the team, doing one with the extended team, and it'll be a different social contract. Like you're going to have different questions, you're going to have different outcomes, but to get that understanding of ways of working from that extended team is great. Also really great to get one from a stakeholder team. And that might be a really short one. It might just be a handful of questions around how do you actually want us to feed things back to you. I don't. I cancelled on him and it's still in my calendar. I did delete that when I decided I was coming here this morning. But he's fine. No worries. He knows I'm not coming to that. What was I talking about? Cool. So also great idea to do one with stakeholders. And just in general, anyone you work with regularly, and it doesn't have to be a super formal thing either. So obviously with a big team, maybe it is a formal thing and you have a formal outcome, but you know, just with your manager, you could have some key things that you want to get out of it. And I am going to, so I'm waffling on about what this is, and some of you might be like, but what do I ask in a social contract? I've got a list of questions that are coming up. But you might just kind of pick a few of those questions that you really want answers from with key people you work with, and you'll have those conversations. In terms of where you should run a social contract, either do it all in real life, which is really preferable because then you can see people's body language. It's really hard to get everyone to feel psychologically safe if it's virtual. But if you can't do all in real life, do it all remote. Just don't do it all hybrid, because the people that are in person are going to be really vulnerable and talk about things. People that are remote are just going to be sitting there feeling really uncomfortable. So it is the kind of session that you need everyone to be in kind of the same context for it, or it just is super hard to do properly. But ideally in person.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Regardless of sort of where you are, whether it's hybrid, remote, whatever it is, you know, how do you address the sort of barrier when a team doesn't necessarily feel safe with each other, right? When you've got barriers and they're not comfortable to sort of communicate in front of one another.
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, it's always like the cliche things. You can always do an icebreaker or something, but sometimes the reality of these sessions is that it just actually doesn't work properly. And then you need to maybe go back and figure out, okay, well, is there something fundamentally broken with the culture here that we are definitely not going to fix through a social contract? Because I'm aware I'm like painting this like a wonderful thing that it can fix everything. Definitely doesn't. There's often really messed up cultural things that you are not going to fix through a social contract. And yeah, I'm going to go through some social contract fails as well, but absolutely touch on that. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I think I have an answer to what he said.
Go for it.
So basically, I don't know if you've heard the saying, give a man a mask and he'll tell you the truth. So I'm a really big fan of how Miro allows you to give anonymous feedback, if that makes any sense. I found that's when people are really honest. So if people are afraid to put a name to their feedback, to what they're saying, that's a good way of getting the truth to come out.
Yeah, definitely. I think another thing on this too is just like tone down the questions and make them really basic to start off with. And it's like, it can be a more formal session around this is really just to talk about what does everyone see as their roles and responsibilities. And you don't go into any of the deeper things. And also like read the room as well. Like you're not going to go into like, what's your spirit animal with your stakeholders? Definitely don't ask that question with them, but you might do a question like that. Maybe we should, but maybe not with everyone. It's like you just have a slightly different format depending on how like safe you already think that group feels with each other. Go for it.
I love what you just said. I think it's really what you're saying about having a mask to tell the truth is true when you're building team trust. Yes. And I think in the beginning, it's good to create safety around that. But I think ultimately you want to get to a point where you don't need that. Yes. And I think that comes with time. And I think it comes with modeling the behavior of leaning into truth together and allowing each other to be honest without repercussion. And that takes time.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's a great though entry, I think, to help you solve
Mm-hmm. Cool. I'm gonna run along with this. So I think I kind of already just touched on this, but in terms of how you should actually run a social contract, there's just so many different ways to do it depending on who you actually want to do a social contract with. So really, if it's just like one person, just your manager or someone that you're managing, or just one other person on your team, you could just go for a walk and ask the questions that you wanted to ask. It doesn't need to be documented or anything, depending on what you want to get out of it. If you do want a more formal thing and you want to have some kind of documentation from it, then make it an in real life team meeting with some really clear outcomes from it, and figure out like what you want to really get from it. In terms of some success stories from this, what we kind of just touched on before, they really don't always work, but some things that kind of happen to make it work. It works when everyone's actually invested in it and people were excited about the project already. When there's already a few people that are kind of halfway out the door on a project, then it's pretty hard to get them more excited. It works when the culture is already really good. And like I was just saying, you're not going to change that with a social contract. When people also remember what was said during the session and people kind of repeat those things later on when you actually agree with some things, oh no, it's just ignore that. Please don't shut down. I came up with a thing before. It's going to reset in a couple of hours, but I think I still have about 40 minutes left, so we're all right. Cool. Also, like it works when the team was comfortable to be vulnerable, and yeah, when you had that openness beforehand. So it is a case of like really trying to read everyone. When people aren't open to doing a social contract, don't call it a social contract. Call it something else. Call it a roles and responsibilities session and just ask the formal questions. Don't ask any of the real deep ones. Read all those things beforehand and don't just have one template for a social contract. Have like 10 different ones, alter it every time you're running a session. In terms of like, for me personally, like the best things that have come out of doing social contracts, some of the things are around when there's like some people that are neurodivergent that actually really open up about it in a session and everyone really understands that and gets it, which is awesome. It's when everyone on the team actually talks about that they just want to have fun on the team and they are excited to work together and things that they can do to make the work more fun. It's exciting when there's been a few times where we've just banned meetings outside of certain windows where we kind of learnt that some people had a kid drop off at this time and other people had pickup at this time. And it was like, great, like suddenly meetings never happened again outside of the 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. window. And that's awesome. It's great when we've really empowered teams through it. People's feedback styles have been understood. And also we've just had, future opportunities of people to be offended by each other suddenly gets avoided because we kind of know that this person is a really direct feedback giving person, and they're not being a jerk. They're just direct in how they spoke. And it's great when we can understand those things from a social contract.
I would also add, I think these things are great for allowing people to be offended and then work through that afterwards. So
100%.
you know, it may stop offence, but it also may allow
A safe place for offence.
exactly and conflict. You know,
Yeah.
having it out.
Totally. Want to go into some cool learning experiences because they don't always work, and some things that have kind of made them fail for me have been when not everyone's invested. So notice that up front. If it kind of looks like people are like, oh, I really don't want to do a social contract, like notice that, read it, don't do a social contract, do something else, call it something else, less questions, make it more simple. Also, when the culture was too toxic to fix, again, social contract is never going to fix that. That like, just leave, do something else.
Just leave.
Leave.
Abort.
Yeah, don't stay. Also, when people don't care about the outcome, like if people are not really there to, or if they're not driven by the outcome, or if you didn't voice it properly beforehand. So if that outcome was unclear of the social contract, people are like, why are we here? We've got work to do. This is not helping my work. Also, if the team just couldn't be vulnerable around each other and there was something blocking them from doing that, then that is a real good thing that's going to mess up a social contract. And yeah, these ones kind of already been said, but if there was already irreversible damage done on the team, kind of need a shake up. It's not going to be fixed by a social contract. It's going to be fixed by people moving to different teams and things changing. Some kind of things that have also come from them for me is to have people kind of jump in and be like, wait, are we planning to plan by doing the social contract? Which some people in other roles definitely get quite annoyed by. Again, it's like realizing, okay, this culture is really toxic. Also, sometimes in social contracts, I found people are really, and this is also can be aligned with toxic culture, people are really scared of documentation. And so they actually really don't want a social contract to be documented, because if they've said, oh, like I'm ADHD or I'm autistic or whatever it is, and but I don't feel safe with anyone at this workplace knowing that, then A, that culture is really bad, but B, let's not document the social contract, because that is obviously something that's not working for people. Also, sometimes in a social contract, you just realize just how truly bad an acquisition was or a certain hire was too. I've definitely had times where I've been vulnerable in a social contract and then realized that no one else was going to, and that's just super awkward and uncomfortable. And like about 7 years ago, I was trying to run a social contract by myself in a room full of 30 males when I was working in agency as midweight designer. That was awful. So again, like figure out who's coming to the meeting, how do we actually make this work? But a little bit about the things that I would put into a social contract. And this is, I guess, just my kind of refined list of questions that I use as a base, but I always change them as well. Like they're never the same questions for every time I do a social contract. It's always going to be different, depending again on what's the outcome of the social contract, who's in the room, how safe do these people already feel around each other. But 3 main sections to what I kind of go with. One's around the basic ways of working. The next is kind of around the individual needs of people, and then the team needs as a whole. So a couple things around the first bit. Communication, actually knowing a little bit about how to communicate with each other is so important. And so just like really simply agreeing on what platform are we going to use. The answer is always Slack. It's never something else.
Unless you work at Telstra.
Yes, or a lot of other companies that use Teams. We found out Designit is also one of them. So sorry. Also, what will our team's kind of main like contact method be? So, you know, is it a stand up once a week? Is it a Slack message? What's the way that we're all going to kind of align? How do we communicate with the broader team? So core team, and then how do you extend your different answers out or your different things that you're working on? Then like where and how we work together. This next question, I actually think is probably one of my most important questions. And I think it's something that when people don't know it, we just get we build resentment towards other people. How much of a priority is this project for everyone? So often people assume that someone's like 100% on something or something's really important to them when they're actually spread across 3 different things. So understanding that someone only has 20% capacity for this project is really, really important. Also, how much time can we dedicate? Sometimes you might think that a leader on the team is actually able to come to every single meeting when they only have maybe 2 hours of their week that they can put into your project. And so it's like, cool, how can you best use those 2 hours of the week? What are you actually going to get out of that person? Also, what cadence do we want to catch up with the whole team as, and what's actually going to be useful in terms of those meetings and rituals that we have with everyone? And then in terms of some things about as an individual, it's really important to understand what everyone sees as their role on a project. So you want everyone to actually be able to openly say, on this project, I see my role as, because you might see that person's role as very different to what they see their role. And that's like another key thing that can just mess up teams so badly when someone's like, I thought you were a UI designer. And they're like, I don't even know how to use Figma. I'm just a researcher. So if people don't understand those things, that can be such a mess on a project. Also really important to kind of understand on this project, my responsibilities are, again, we might assume that people have different responsibilities to what they see those responsibilities are. And if we can talk through them in a social contract-like meeting, then we can also challenge them a bit and suggest other things or just understand them a bit more. Another part of this is how I work best. So different environments, times of day. I've kind of got to this really great point where I almost religiously block out the afternoons in my calendar to just get focus work done. And because people know me so well in the workplaces, like no one dares puts a meeting in the afternoon. I just have all my meetings in the morning because I'm so glad that I'm running this before lunchtime, because I don't function that well after lunchtime. And it's good to know like what ways do people work best. So do you prefer having meetings in the morning? Do you prefer to focus work done later? Do you go for a really long walk at some point? When do you kind of space out? All those things. Also really important to understand what are the things that people struggle with, and knowing those things about people so you can support the people on your team. This one's like a bit of a one that I think you just ask maybe more core teams than that, but how to motivate and demotivate people on your team is good to know, like particularly for those key people you work with, and potentially some superpowers. Again, that's a read the room question of whether you ask your stakeholders that or not, but it's a good one to kind of talk to your core team about. And then a few questions that you might ask as a team. So getting your team to think about, as a team, we would be successful if, or I don't like being on teams that X, or you can make my life easier on a project by doing a certain particular thing, goals and concerns we might have for the team, and then how we make decisions and deal with conflict. So there are a lot of questions, and to get through all of them appropriately in an hour is only really achievable with quite a small team. So again, you'd really go through, cool, how many people am I inviting? Like, what do I really want out of this? What questions do I ask? How much time am I allowed to use from these people as well? And if you do have that buy-in, then great, you can extend this out. There was one of the designers in my team, her team was so excited about this that she was able to get 2 hours in their calendar and really go through a really thorough social contract and get the team working well together. But if you don't have buy-in, then don't ask all the questions, just ask some necessary ones and get what you can out of it. So this is just like a little bit of a way that I've it's a very boring Miro template, and I'm sure that people here could make much more exciting ones that you could use. But if I am doing this in Miro, then I might set it up a little bit like this, but I also wouldn't always do it in Miro. It could be a completely different way of doing it. If it's just that one-on-one, then it might be really a completely undocumented conversation. And ask people beforehand, like if they are uncomfortable with documentation, don't make them fill in a Miro board because they're just going to feel even more uncomfortable. Just have a conversation about these things. On this as well, so sometimes I would, like, depending on who is actually part of it. So, you know, this first one, I might make a certain version that's like, okay, this is going to be my core team that I talk to. And then I'll cut out a bunch of questions as I'm doing one with the close team, because it's like, cool, we already decided these things with the core team. I don't need these answers from the close team because we're just going to tell you guys how we're going to communicate back to you. And then with the stakeholders, you may have pre-decided a heap of things, or they're things that's like, this is not stakeholder questions. And again, so you cut out a bunch of stuff. So kind of already spoken a little bit about this, but in terms of actually making a social contract, it's really important to think of that outcome at the start and be really clear in voicing that outcome to the entire team that you're doing a social contract with. Like, why are you bringing this group of people together? What's the method, the platform, the forum? Yeah, how's everyone going to show up? How's it going to work? And also in terms of the outcome for it, like the outcome could be a bunch of different things. You could end up with a team charter that you actually write out and print out and have on the walls, and it has all these different things in it. It talks about, yeah, we're only having meetings between these times of the day. We're all going to have afternoon tea together this day or have beers or something, but you've agreed on a bunch of things and it's there and it's written out. But that might not feel right. So, you know, the outcome might not even be a tangible thing. It could really just be around building that alignment and vulnerability within the team. Yeah, it could be a bunch of different things though. So having that outcome front of mind first is really important. Cool. I wasn't even meant to be here today, so I feel like this kind of fits this. But I also feel like this is kind of a good chance to throw this back to everyone else. And if people don't have questions for me, I'm going to ask questions for you all. So cool, we have a question at the back.
I was wondering, like, what happens after you run but then is there like a follow-up that you do on like second session to check in if everybody still feels the same? That's the end of my question. Thanks for the mic.
I mean, I heard it anyway. So if anyone didn't hear it, it was around, do you have a follow-up, or yeah, you checking in if people feel the same way? I kind of think it depends. So if the team changes and you have all these new people in the team, then you probably want to run another social contract at some point to make sure that, because I don't know, you might end up with this whole team that's real chummy, and then there's this new person that doesn't understand all these weird things that everyone's doing. And that could be good to do another social contract. Or it could be that, you know, if that doesn't seem like a priority for the team, it could be kind of cool as an outcome from a social contract that everyone creates like a team, what are they called? There's like a team, like a person trading card, and you all have like little design trading cards, which kind of says, hey, I'm this person. This is like my role. This is how I like to work. And you can just like give them to new team members and they can give you one in return. And that is kind of a version of a social contract too, which is quite nice to have. If you do heaps of social contracts, people are like, why are we doing this? This is dumb. So rather than do another one in 3 months' time, like just have regular retros and have that kind of documentation from the social contract. Cool, we learned these things. Are we still doing these things? And actually check in a retro with the team and see how do people feel about this. Yeah.
I have a question with regards to this being a, thank you, Tiffany. Being a contract, that means that unfortunately things go wrong and sometimes people breach contracts. So asking the spicy question of, what do we do when we notice that people aren't actually being respectful? I understand there's limits with culture and that sort of thing. And as you've already called out, sometimes there's just things you can't fix. But do you maybe have any advice or ways of handling situations where it's starting to become apparent that people have engaged, have been willing, but then potentially are not actually following through on the promises or essentially the contract that's been established?
Yeah. So this is, I love the word spicy, but it just has so many applications. So I guess like the answer for that is truly it depends, and it like depends on what level the social contract was done at. So if this is just your core team and people in the core team are not abiding by those things, then like you really need to push the people in your core team to change, because if that core team mix and how you work together is so important. But I mean, I have seen this in previous workplace where at like the executive level, the teams come up with a team charter, and then actually the execs have been ignoring what was in the team charter. It kind of goes a little bit against what like Elaine was saying before, but if you don't have a seat at the table, you can't change that. And that's just actually how it is. Like if the execs are not abiding by the team culture, like get out of that organization. That is not something that you are going to be able to change.
Do you have any kind of like small attempts before job membership? Like maybe it's a smaller example or smaller situation.
I think definitely like for smaller ones, if it is like at a lower level within the team, just have the conversations and hopefully within social contracts, you've agreed on how you want to talk through feedback and how you deal with conflict and make decisions as a team. And if that was like, let's all get together in person and talk about it, then just put some time in everyone's calendar and actually talk about it and bring up the list again. It's like, hey, we've agreed on these things. How does everyone feel about this? I've noticed that this person, or not, don't even say someone's name, just say, we as a team have not been doing this thing. How do we feel about it? Is it something we should still be doing? Stefan?
Yeah, we've done it in the past where we actually made as a question as part of the social contract as well. So it's like you just discuss, okay, how do we keep ourselves accountable? And yeah, if you feel comfortable, make this a part of the conversation.
I've got a bit of a rambly question, but hopefully
love a rambling question.
I'm a team of 2. I've just onboarded. My manager's the founder. How do I want to do this, but I feel like there's a bit that I've got to build some trust and credibility before I can go in and I don't know.
I actually don't think so. I kind of feel like if it's just the 2 of you, then you actually need to do this. Because if you don't know those things straight, like if you're just a team of 2 and it's like startup environment, then you 2 being able to work together is like if that doesn't work, everything else goes to shit. So
yeah.
I would almost just be like, take the template and kind of say, hey, how do you feel about us doing a thing like this? Could be good for our ways of working together, could avoid us like having any resentment about anything or miscommunication down the track. Should we just do one, or do you want to change the questions with me a bit and then we'll do it together? But whatever you do, like do some version of this, because that kind of working relationship desperately needs it.
Yeah, we've had a go at it, but I feel like it could be done a little bit better.
Or get like an external facilitator. So I think that's the biggest thing that's worked for me. If this hasn't, like if I haven't been able to run it for my team because there's not the buy-in from other people, if you get someone externally to come and facilitate, I mean, in general, like a retro social contract, if you're participating, you probably shouldn't be facilitating it. It should be an external facilitator in order to make everyone feel equal and safe. So that'd probably be the better thing to do. Get someone else in.
I would agree with that. Because then there's an unbiased sort of moderator.
Yeah, and feeling like because I'm being eaten on her would have been the bait.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
power dynamic there, but kind of just outdating.
External facilitator, 100%. You definitely, don't try and do this alone. Yeah. No, that was great. Yep.
Hi. So this is kind of off topic, but
Nothing's off topic yet.
Okay, cool. Hello. So our company, unfortunately, half of us have been made to come back into the office 3 days a week, which means that we are having a lot of hybrid situations. You mentioned that hybrid is a last resort, but like, do you have any advice for how you can improve hybrid working? Because I've noticed like we'll have discussions in person, but then there's like a sad floating head of someone on the wall like that can't really contribute as much.
I have so many views on this. There's just been like so many conversations in so many different places and so many like bizarre views on people needing to come back to the office. And even though we've all got so used to working remotely and changed our lives around that and everything, I mean, ultimately, like if people are coming to the office And there should also be in a social contract, like why are they coming into the office and how are you creating purpose on the days that people are actually in the office as well? So, I mean, the teams that I've worked in, there's like a certain amount of flexibility on which days we come in, but it's also, these are our set team days. You need to come in on at least one of these set team days. And if you're running a social contract, it's either on one of those set team days or it's on a day that you know most people are going to be remote. And if not everyone's remote, but most people are, then those two people in the office, get them to just separately be on their laptops and run it as if it's a remote meeting. It's just, yeah, I don't know. I mean, sometimes like hybrid meetings do work if you've got the people that are remote are quite loud voices. Like I don't mind being the person that's remote when other people are in the room, but I've definitely noticed for other people, if they are that singular remote person, they'll just kind of step back, turn their camera off, and probably won't even be at their computer anymore. So it's such a tricky one because it's so dependent on the team dynamic and the people in the room and how that all works. But I don't know, I really feel like ultimately if you're coming into the office, then there should be team days, or otherwise it's like, why are people coming to the office? Do other people have other answers for that? Everyone's smart people in this room. Yeah.
Thank you. With hybrid meetings and our manager, who is facilitator, just allow time for those who online to contribute. So he deliberately stops, asks for them, and allow a few minutes for everyone to gather their thoughts and share. Just give time.
Yeah, totally.
Also about normalizing it.
Mm-hmm.
So what we've seen in our company was that people always apologize if they're online. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm online. And it's like actually calling out, don't say sorry. It's okay to be online or normal. And sort of like paying attention to other people in the room as well. It's sort of like, yeah, I think that's important as well to really think about like how we can normalize this a bit more.
Yeah. On that as well, how you just kind of said, you know, tell people to like, don't say sorry. We actually, one of our social contracts that we did when I was working at Macquarie, there was a few people on the team and we'd noticed that a couple of us had like kept apologizing for really dumb things. One of our things in our social contract was like point out when someone was saying sorry and be like, don't say sorry. And that was literally one of the things that came into our social contract just because we all realized we were super kind of apologizing Australians that do that a lot. And that's not actually a good thing to do, but that was a cool thing that, anyway, that was just a brain fart that kind of came out of what you said, Stefan. But yeah.
Have any advice on, like, we have quite a few sort of young team dynamic in terms of like how much experience people have outside of the current team. Do you have any advice on like how we get people to know the answer to that question of how you like to work? Because I think if we ran it in our team how it is, a lot of people will be like, well, I've just done it this way, so I don't know that I would like to do it another way.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think like, yeah, a lot of people don't know those things. And so sometimes it's really nice to send the questions out to people beforehand, like maybe a week before, and get them to have a bit of a think about it and reflect on it. Yeah, I don't know, in modern day society, like people actually don't reflect as much as we might think they do. And then if you send them some key questions, they'll be like, how do I like to work?
Time to reflect, but also maybe prompt in session with different ways. So these are some ways that others work, and then that gives them some options to think through. Oh, yeah, that is how I work, or maybe I could do it that way.
Yeah, definitely. And as you're going through other people's answers, then sometimes that'll trigger something for someone. They'll be like, oh, maybe I should try doing that. That sounds great. And I think by having more senior people in that room as well that are kind of saying, these are the things I like to do, that actually changes the way junior people work too. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Connor.
Hey, Ailie. Yeah, just wondering, how do you go about concluding the sessions for the social contract? Like I've been in teams where everyone writes like an individual commitment to the team to kind of wrap everything up, but do you do like a synthesis on everyone's questions? Just curious about that part.
So again, it's kind of depended on like who was in it, what was the purpose of it, and everything beforehand. And so there's been a bunch of different things. There's been when I used to work at Isobar, we pretty much always ended up with like a team charter afterwards that we like physically printed out and had on our little odd wall when we were all in the office every single day. But in other things, it's literally just been, this was just a conversation over coffee with one person, and these were just some nice things to know, and we didn't really feel like we needed to document anything. But yeah, for other ones, it is like a promise that people make to kind of commit to and keep going with. Actually, that's a kind of good question to throw back to the room. Has anyone else had things from a social contract that they've like, yeah, people have committed to or wrapped it up really nicely? Yeah.
But basically, I had to work with someone who I knew we weren't going to get along with. We didn't have similar ways of working. I was like, this is going to be a shitstorm. And we sat down and we kind of like mapped through the work we had to do together, like did that professional bit. And I was kind of like, how do you, what do you feel about telling me what to do? And we just had this conversation, and then we came up with this random phrase that we would use. And it was cheesecake rattlesnake, because that's just like two objects that were around at the time. And we had a hashtag. No, it was like lollies. So we went with like cheesecake rattlesnake. Where is this document? So for the rest of the time we worked together, we had this like little phrase that just allowed us to break from, oh, I'm sorry, but have you seen it? And like we would do the, that dance of apologizing to each other because we were about to hit them with some hard feedback or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So she and I, when we worked together, she'd just turn around and go, cheesecake rattlesnake, where's this? And because we were at different levels, like I was quite a bit more senior, and it just leveled it. And then when I had to come back and like deliver some things I didn't like, I was like, listen, cheesecake rattlesnake, why, and it was good. And so that kind of, it worked.
That's awesome.
Was it sort of like warning?
I'm about to yeah. And I kind of said to her, I was like, I said to her, I don't like to cotton candy wrap everything. And she's like, neither do I. And I was like, oh, good. Well, what if I said to you, you can just like hurt my feelings? And she was like, ugh. And then we just kind of got to this natural point of, we're just going to.
Safe word.
Yeah, we're going to save. Yeah. I don't like calling it that because it sounds weird, but like, yeah, hashtag CCRS, bang. And there was like all the feedback that you could do. Yeah.
Right, awesome. I love that. It's a great way to wrap it up. Did anyone else have other like cool stuff that came out of a social contract or like a similar type meeting that did work? Yeah.
I need the microphone. Yeah, since everyone was quiet. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm quite a fan of having something written down at the end of it as a sort of team commitment, right? And I think that's like whether that's a poster or something to print out, I think that's great. But I think rather than individual commitments, it's almost nice to have a commitment that everyone says, all right, this is our team commitment to each other, and that also then brings out just opens up the ability for people to feedback whenever that's breached in some way, because unless that's written down, that's very rarely happening, right? What I've done also in the past, if there's enough trust, you can actually get people to sign that, right? Yeah. That's kind of nice. I mean, it doesn't always work because sometimes not everyone agrees with everything that's written down. But I think that's really important, is also to bring that list at the end down to something that everyone can actually commit to, rather than having 5 points that everyone will commit to, but then a few that are a bit contentious.
I actually love the idea of getting people to sign it. I haven't done that since I was in agency and we were all physically in a place and we printed it and had it all signed. But I'm just kind of reflecting of when I've done this more at an exec level, and it's always the execs that go back on it. Like it's not your junior, it's the execs. And if you got your exec team to sign a social contract, and then you could show it to them later when they did break it, that would be so powerful. So I think getting people to sign it's awesome.
Yeah, good luck getting an exec to sign it though.
Yeah, we can try. We'll see.
Once it's sort of created, how do you sort of resurface it, right? How do you bring it back up and keep it relevant if it's not, say, sort of printed and on a wall, especially if we're sort of all hybrid, right? Like, or remote.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess like, again, back to like the outcome of it in the first place, if it was just always a casual chat kind of thing with just one person, then you might again mention, oh, like, hey, I thought you did this thing or something. But that's why the casual chat one is so much more loose. If you did really want something that you could keep surfacing at other times, then you need like a tangible thing that comes from it. You need an actual like team charter or something that appears, and you're like, cool, these are the things we agreed on. it's printed out, or it's like, I don't know, you start your Monday morning meeting with it every week or something. I mean, when I worked at, I keep on bringing up Isobar, but they actually did so much of this stuff really well. They don't even exist anymore. So many agencies that I work at that don't exist anymore. But Isobar and Fjord did a lot of the social contract stuff really, really well. And like, start of every single project, we did one, and it just set everything up for success, and always had like a physical team charter that was just printed out, and it just was very tangible and very real. And I do think that's like when it works best, when you've got this thing that then people actually get reminded of. If you don't have a thing, then people are like, yeah.
Is a board at a space in time that decays.
Yeah, and if it is just in a Miro board that hasn't been synth or anything, it's also irrelevant. It needs like 5 dot points, like super clear, super concise. It's not, yeah, it's just 5 points. It's always 5 points.
For our team, yeah, we had like a team charter at the end, and then I guess the agreement is that we'll refer it back during retros to go like, hey, or you do quarterly wrap ups or whatever like that, to go, how did the team feel? We agreed on this, and that doesn't seem to be happening. And then we figure out how to resolve. So
yeah, I love that. I love the idea of bringing it back in a retro. And I think we had this question earlier around like, yeah, how do you bring these things back? And if you're kind of reminding people within a retro, it's like, hey, do we feel like we're actually still living by these things? Or maybe it's another kind of ways of checking in with how people are going, whether that's like an office vibe survey or just a kind of pulse check on everyone. And some of maybe within that survey, some of the questions are actually inside that. It's like, hey, do you still think you're living by this value, or whatever it might be? Does anyone else have a
one last thing to that? I mean, I was going to say resurfacing in retros is good, but one other thing I've found values or social agreements or contracts or whatever really good for is actually conversations around performance management or behavioral stuff. So you can actually casually go, well, remember when we said we were going to do this and you're not doing it? Like that, it's a really good way to have a baseline for what's acceptable. So that's how it's resurfaced for me. And there was one other thing I was going to raise is this, I've never used it, but it's called Handbook of Me. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. It looks amazing, and it's kind of like just a Fig Jam template with some really good prompts around getting to know you. It's design centric, so it's all quite around UX, but really good if you've just jumped into manage a team and you want to do one of these and regroup with everyone and bring them together. Handbook of Me. Yeah.
Sick. I feel like there's one other. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you have any tips and tricks on facilitating this kind of conversations? Because not everyone understood the meaning of this kind of workshop, and not everyone is like super open to it. But if you just have an hour, how do you get people to be like as vulnerable? I think this is a safe space to start with.
Yeah. I do feel like if you've never done one before, then don't just try and do one having never participated in one. I think it's so much better to try and be a participant first. If no one in your workplace has ever done one, and it feels like culture-wise that it might just fail if you try and run one, then get an external facilitator to actually come in and do it for you. Because I don't know, I think I have met quite a few people that are like, oh, social contracts are so shit, because they've had such a bad experience with it. It was probably like run by someone that had no idea how to run them properly.
Around it.
Yeah.
Like, we say we do this, but we don't actually do it. And so there's a bit of like an eye roll that comes with like, oh, our values.
Yeah.
They don't believe it.
Definitely. So if you can get someone else to come in and actually do the first one and get people excited about it, if you're worried that it's going to fail, then I think that'd be a really good idea. Just going to unplug this in a second.
But sometimes getting external resources is not that easy. But do you rather just let us do it?
Even if it's like, just find a really confident, good public speaker that's not on that core team that you're doing a social contract with, and ask them, like have a one-on-one with them and say, hey, like, I'd really like to run a social contract. This is what it's about. What do you think? Would you be able to run it for my team? Like, it doesn't need to cost anything. It just need someone that's good at facilitating.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And not in the team.
Yeah, not in the team. Someone that is not part of it. Oh, I think that unless there's anything else, but it's like 2 minutes to go, but they're already going out there. So
You stretched it. Well done.
one last one.
Where do we get the board?
I mean, I can probably just send it to people if people really want it. So yeah, totally. Just send me an email and I can send it around. I'm gonna ask me for my email.
That was awesome.
Thank you.